So one of the things that's kind of interesting is how the nature of analyzing our economy currently has become rather political. Now, of course, with the election approaching, I suppose most things tend to become political, it seems like, in this day and age. But our assessment of the economy seems to be a political discussion point at this point. So, is the economy good or bad? Well, that depends, apparently, if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you're a Republican, you would argue that inflation is eating everybody's lunch, or especially lower income people's lunch, and that the economy is not as good as it seems. Now, the as it seems part is based on the data that the Democrats like to point to, and they like to point out the fact that the stock market is doing great. The unemployment numbers look really good, very low unemployment, and wage growth has been wages have been rising, I think, and and now the people that would offer a counterpoint would say, well, first of all, inflation makes so that you don't feel any better off with the better wages, and secondly, a lot of these jobs that were supposedly added were part-time jobs. So does this just mean that people are doing, like, most people are working perhaps, but not because not because there's these wonderful jobs being created, but because it's lower paying, kind of trashy part-time stuff that people are picking up. So anyway, kind of interesting how it's become sort of a political uh, you know, talking point. I think that, for anyone who's even a little bit right leaning, it's easy to look back at I say anyone. I think for many people who are right leaning, it's easy to look back to the Trump years and be like, yeah, maybe I wasn't making as much money back then, but man, it didn't take nearly as much money. It's, inflation is cumulative, meaning, let's say we've got the inflation rate back down to where it's supposed to be. Well, that's great, but it's not erasing any past inflation. So if we had a year with, let's say, 9% inflation or whatever it was, I'm not sure what the worst year was. Maybe it was 6%. I'm not sure. Whatever the worst inflation was that we had post COVID here and whatever. If you look back and it's not that that 9% didn't go away, or that 6% or whatever it was, that didn't go away. That's still there. So it's just that now it's the rate of increase that's slowed down. But those prior increases to inflation, like if you bought, if ground beef used to be, $3 a pound, and is now $5 a pound, that's not, just because inflation has slowed down does not make beef $3 a pound again, right? So it would be interesting to calculate, I suppose someone has. Be interesting to calculate a little bit to see how wage growth at different levels has kind of kept up with inflation. Some of the larger tech companies certainly seem to have trimmed back and leaned out a little bit more on their workforce. So it does seem like there are probably quite a number probably of white collar people who are trying to find good gigs. Now, obviously, it's not a huge number, I guess, because the unemployment number is still pretty good. So it's an interesting time. It's like of course, I think for anyone, I mean, your personal economy is still the most important in terms of how you experience the economy, right? So, like, if you personally are doing well, obviously that's going to bias how you feel about the economy. And it's potentially possible for you to be doing well regardless of the economy. So if you're in that position, then that's fantastic, and it's also possible for you to struggle in the economy. So if you, even if the numbers are great, but you're not doing well personally, whether it's from something out of your control that happened or something in your control, either one. And then obviously that's going to probably tend to shape your perspective on what the economy is like right now. one thing that people do point out to why people might be feeling, why the average consumer might not be feeling like the economy is that great, why they might be feeling a little squeezed, is because of interest rates. And so, with higher interest rates, access to consumer lending is, it's not like, I don't know that it's hard to get consumer loans. It's just that the cost of consumer loans have gone up, of course. And so, that interest expense kind of acts like friction in the economic system, and it's supposed to, right? It's supposed to slow it down so there's less inflation, um, however blunt of a tool that it may be. And so, yeah, it kind of seems like between the high interest rates versus inflation, it kind of seems like a pick your poison type of scenario. But yeah, interesting stuff, interesting times. And I don't know, we were so used to such low interest rates for so long. It'd be interesting to see if we ever go back to those low rates, or if we're now, if it's ever going to, like for instance, on a home loan, a mortgage rate's ever really going to go down past about 5% or so now, or is the new norm now for the next several decades? Or are we going to just have interest rates that on the whole are higher? I don't know. Wow, this camera and this lighting, somehow it's looking very strange in terms of quality. But yeah, I would testify. My personal testimony is that it's amazing how much money it takes for one household now. I would also testify that God has been gracious in providing for us, in increasing our income, and that we, we're doing okay. We experienced generosity through friends this year, helping to fund a GoFundMe for some care for one of my daughters, and so yeah, so we're fine in the general sense of fine. Not just, and I don't mean that just in purely looking at my bank account, but I mean in looking at the fact that God takes care of us. And so I don't go completely by what my bank account number is when I'm determining if I'm fine or not. I also go by whether I believe that God is going to take care of us. And I believe that He will and that He is. And so we're fine. As the Lord's Prayer says, we have enough for today. And so that's great. That's, you could argue, all you ever need is enough for that day.